Deficit dawn? Red ink gushes and President Donald Trump may have to hand out some new nicknames for himself after endorsing a bipartisan budget deal with Congress. $1 trillion Trump deficit dawn? With a new bipartisan budget deal that does nothing to cut federal spending, Trump is on track for another $1 trillion deficit this year. And there's no reason. Candidate Trump bragged that he would pay off the entire federal debt in 8 years, but President Trump is governing as if deficits don't matter. In fact, Trump is approaching the level of red ink from President Barack Obama's first term, when Obama racked up $1 trillion deficits 4 years in a row. Trump is on pace, but there are huge differences. Trump has a growing economy with historically low unemployment and a soaring stock market, while Obama was battling a brutal downturn in the economy during the worst recession in 80 years, making it much harder to curb federal spending. Though Trump's administration has repeatedly proposed massive cuts in its annual budget plans, lawmakers in both parties have laughed off the proposals. Now Trump has this was a real compromise in order to give another big victory to our great military and vets.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.